Peace and love, African family. Peace, love, and sunlight. This is Ankeru from Jam Tours Africa family. And today, guys, Jam Tours is in his court, and Jam Tours is vying to be the GOAT, the greatest of all time, to bring back African diaspora and the continent back to where they came from, back to where they was stolen from, back to where they were they was taken away and enslaved from, back to where they were kidnapped from, family. So today, guys, it's a very special day. It's the first time I'm in a court, family. I bought this coat like 3 months ago, and I said to myself that, what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is not even, But today I say, guys, my brother from from Tanzania will relocate to Kenya. He's actually, a part of the Pan-African Council. I have another brother who flew in, who's a part of the Pan-African Council. I have a brother from Haiti, who's a part of the Pan-African Council. Everybody should be at the Pan-African Council, family. The membership, if the link is available, I'll put it here. Where there's gonna be a membership for you to join, family. So when you come to Kenya, family, you get connected into a whole ecosystem that can guide you and support you so you don't get scammed, family. So today, guys, we actually have a lecture at the University of Nairobi. It's the first lecture of the year for the Pan-African Council. And as you know, guys, that's where our office will be. We have a memorandum of understanding with the Pan-African, with the Nairobi University, and that's where we'll be conducting our business, and that's where we'll be educating and actually, uplift and empower the youth, their mind, family, with, conscious Pan-African lecture and speech and talk. So, we are like the Dr. Umar in America. In Kenya, we are like the Dr. Umar family. The Pan-African Council, we just kicked it off, family, and, we have some amazing, actually, partnership coming up and stuff like that. What we plan to do, our brother from Canada is here, and he's an accountant, and he's looking to recruit highly skilled, highly educated, highly efficient, highly professional Kenyans from the university. So that's a partnership already, family. We never ask feet and it fall in our hand. So we're going to actually connect him up with a university, and we're going to have a partnership with the accounting and finance department to actually give internship to university students to go in the States. Because as you guys know, guys, the Pan-African Council, once you have the mind and you go out, you come back with the resources to help develop the continent. And we can see that. The chairman of the Pan-African Council is a Jamaican, Bayesian, and Asian. And he was sent away to China to study when he was like a youth. He finished him study, and him go so boom, him go Ghana, go start a shea butter business back in the 90s. Back in the 2000s, I think him said. And him actually, South Africa, Rwanda, them all over the place, family, but him actually found that Kenya is his home. So, we link up in Kenya and probably link up a partnership start, a relationship start, and that's what we're trying to do and want to do, family. So now he's actually out in South Africa, but Jam Tours is here on the ground. Every man connected and every man have them role to play. So my role to play is to connect the people. So when he come back into the country, I'll connect him with everybody who I meet and let them have a conversation and discussion, and we see how we can work together, family. So today, guys, we have a lecture at the University of Nairobi. It's gonna be a talk on how to bridge the gap between African American and African, because they still try to use systematic racism and colorism and classism and all that ism to put us apart from each other, family. And that's why the Pan-African mindset is the thing one, and it's the thing Africa first, family. And that's why we want to actually educate and let our brothers, African brothers and sisters know in the States that as an African, we are one, and we are not just actually, you're an African American, I'm an African and stuff like that, and there's a beef and a war. We don't want a war, All we need is peace, love, and unity, family. So this lecture, we're going to start from the university. So when these kids come from the university and go to the US, they don't look at African American different from them, family. And that's the reason why we're going to nip it in the bud. We're going to plant the seed and, grow the tree, and then the fruit will be fruitful, and the fruit will be, will grow good family. So in Jamaica we say we bend the tree from it young, and that's what we want to do, family. That's what we're trying to do. We're gonna bend the tree from it young, family. So let's go, family. Let's go. Today is my first day at the University of Nairobi. It's the first day wearing my coat. It's the first day, you know what I mean? Yeah, family. So let's go. As we go, we grow. We don't stay one place, you know what I mean? We always grow. So when you see me wearing my coat for the first time, you know that big things gonna be happening, and big change we're gonna make changes and stuff, and we're gonna shake up the system. All right, family, let's go. So what I'm gonna do now, guys, I'm gonna pick up my brother Alex. As you know, he's an Asian here, and he's actually just first time in Kenya. So anywhere you take Alex right now is actually something. Anywhere you take Alex is actually you know what I mean? Anywhere you take him is good, because you know nowhere in Kenya. So today I'm gonna see what the universities look like and stuff. We want to actually go to the market. The one Scotty said we want to go to the market, and our sister Bridget, the queen, she haven't been featured on the channel for a while, so I'm gonna pick her up today, and then we're gonna go to the market after. So guys, let's go. Let's go. Yeah, family, so you know I have to stop to get my juice. This is the hydration juice, family. You drink one of this, you don't need to drink water throughout the day. As I said before, guys, I used to be having water right here with me every day. Now, once I drink one of this or two, I'm good for the day. No water. That's my experience, family. You know, Jam Tours observe everything. And you know what I mean? Just to understand everything, you have to observe everything, family. Just observe, or whatever you want to say. Wow. Yeah, family. Natural ingredients, they say, family. Natural ingredients. So this is like watermelon juice, coconut juice, coconut water. As you know, your body needs electrolytes. Your body don't need water, family. Your body needs soluble water. You know what I mean? Any fruits that has water, that's hydration, and that's what the body need. So trust me. So really and truly, you know, you need to drink water, family. I'm telling you this. And if you don't believe me, you know what I mean, I'm experiencing it for real right now, because I'm like, since I started drinking this juice, I'm like, I noticed myself not carrying water in the car. I was like shocked. I didn't even notice it. I was like, because I drink it every day. Wow. Fuck, man. Guy. Try to get that wipe, stick up this blood clot. You know, my clothes are white in a family, and then this thing go up on it now. Mess up the entire thing. Alright, guys, let's go. Yeah, family, so I'm now at the Nairobi University. I'm waiting for Alex to come. He's actually on his way, so I'm just waiting for him to come, family. So we're now at the Nairobi University. We never got a university, but now we come back. Yeah, family, so we're inside Nairobi University. We're on the 4th floor. We're looking for the lecture theater. We're looking for where the talk is keeping. So let's look around. I wonder if it's in here, so. Like I hear Lumos device. Oh, Lumos is the... Yeah, family. So this is the staff bathroom. The University of Nairobi. They have staff and student bathrooms. So I just come in, take a piss, and set up my coat. Because you know, guys, I am the GOAT. All right, guys, let's go.
We must come back and remind ourselves what we already know. So our objective in this particular lecture, talk a little bit about African history, a brief review of African history. I get carried away with that because that's a passionate subject for me. Then we're going to discuss the African diaspora. What is the African diaspora? Then we're going to do a deep dive in the United States, because in honor of the Center for the Study of the United States, we should look now at the African component of the United States. In other words, the black people in the United States as part of this great experiment that we know as America. And then we're going to look at some aspects of the return to Africa from the diaspora. And then finally, as we discuss a little bit about those Africans who are, in my opinion, hypnotized to continue to want to go to the United States to live, because that's the programming that we get. We must immediately, as soon as we have got our degree, go to the United States because that's where we're going to make the money, that's where we're going to be rich, this is where our lives are going to take off. And so for those of us in this room, we start to have to ask the question, if the United States is so great, why are people like me here in Kenya? Okay, I'm an educated person, I have all the skills and background. Why am I here in Africa, and why am I not in the United States? Some of the reasons of that we're going to look at here today, and so that will inform the decision, and that's very important, because we see that as a person in the United States. You go to Washington, D.C., all of the streets are filled with Uber drivers who are engineers and doctors from Kenya and Nigeria and Ethiopia. They're engineers, doctors, lawyers, and they're over there driving Ubers because they were told that if they go to America, this is where they're going to make their life. And they've come to find out after they have made that major mistake that that was not the best move within their day. So we're going to examine that and look at that some. So I have a lot of material here. And this is one of the problems. I tend to put too much in here, but since I'm in the academic environment, and I know people here think, I have two words for you: keep up. Okay? Because we have a lot of stuff, and I want people to engage. There are three groups of people in this room. There are those people in this room who say, hey, I'm with it, I know what he's talking about, I'm on that side, I'm with it. And then you have another group, smaller. I don't think I can go along with that. I know what I believe. He's not saying the stuff that I've already been learned, or I've already learned, so I'll just sit through and watch this, but I'm not really going to engage them. And then you got a third group of people who are not quite sure. Those are the ones that I want to talk to today. Those whose minds are open to say, is this make sense? Is this making sense? Is this something that we can engage with? So that's the introduction, so let's just get into it. First of all, what is the African Diaspora? The African Union has established the sixth district of the sixth division of African identity. The five regions, the north region, the western region, the central, the eastern, the southern region. We all know about that, we're familiar with those. Those are the regions of Africa basically carried over from the formation of the Organization of African Unity. And then, from that period, in this area, we as African people spread throughout the world and populated the human race. And this is a very important one. This is where we came in contact with the Neanderthal, which was another humanoid species, but who were not completely human beings. And that's a deep one that we are slowly starting to understand right now. That when we look at people who are out of this area, who today what we call Europeans, it's documented proof that these people are admixture, they're not human beings. The only true human beings on earth are those people who came from the Homo sapiens sapiens, basically from the African continent. Again, more things that we need to learn. And as we develop the most advanced societies on earth. We don't even have, I'm just going to remind us about ancient Egypt at 42, 41, 4,000 years before the birth of Christ. We were having calendars. We had studied the cosmos. We understood the stars. And by the 18th dynasty, 1,500 years before the birth of Christ, we had built all of the pyramids, the step pyramids, the Sphinx, and all of these things. 130 pyramids were built. This is before anyone had ever left Europe. And we have to understand that and accept that, because the Europeans will come to tell us that, oh no, Egypt was a white society, but they failed us to show us where all those pyramids that they built in Europe are. But we have not been able to find them, because we know that the Europeans did not build that, and this is from our African genius that these societies came from. These are the things, and they're there today. And our people built the greatest, largest of learning in the world, the Grand Lodge of Luxor, the center of all knowledge on earth at that time. And this is the important part, and the interesting thing to me as an engineer, we as Africans painted ourselves as Africans in Egypt. These paintings are 3,000 years old. When we painted ourselves as Tutankhamun, and as an engineer, I just wondered, I said, my goodness, what type of technology did they have for paint that is still there 3,000 years later? When we paint things today with all of our advanced technology, the paint may last 100 years, but they were able to develop paint that lasts for 3,000 years in the desert. So we clearly were operating at a different level of technology that we don't understand today. And so this is the timeline of Egypt to show that these were all the pre-dynastic Egypt. These are 3,000 years BC, all the way up through Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, all the way down. And it was only here in the last 100 years, 1,000 years BC, that anyone who was not African even came to Egypt. So they would like to tell us that Egypt was a European society, that the Africans didn't build that. That is complete rubbish. This was an African society which came down from Ethiopia, down the Nile River, and established the most advanced society in the world, coming from Nubia. This is what we have to study and embrace this, that there's no way anyone can tell us that this was not an African society, and because it was an African, it was of Africans. And even during the same time period, where today we have a Sahara Desert, in 1000 AD to 1500 AD, we had trade routes throughout the entirety of what is now the Sahara Desert, and all of the greatest empires at that time, the Ghana Empire, 1000 AD, Mali Empire, Songhai, these were all the empires that we had built in Africa. And this is the one thing we have to recognize. These were relics of our own technological development. At that time, Timbuktu was one of the greatest universities in the world. We're talking about in the 14th century. And the 14th century is a very critical period in human development. We want to talk about that. This was when the Arab slave trade began, and when they started taking our people out of the continent during this time, and this was the beginning of our decline. And so we found that, we were being taken out through these different paths, down through from Kenya to Tanzania, and all of these people. And this was a period of time when Africa's declined because we began focusing on external issues such as Islam and other things that were not indigenous to the African continent. And that movement gives us today the African diaspora, the Arab world. When you go there and you see these people, and these are Africans even though they have convinced themselves that they're Arabs. Part of our African diaspora. And the global development of the 14th century is a critical time for us to recognize what was happening in the 14th century. We just saw that the great kingdoms of Africa existed long before the European had taken place. As I point out, Mansa Musa, the richest man ever known to this day, where we had already studied the cosmos, were able to identify binary stars and things that the rest of the world had no knowledge of. This was knowledge in the African world, most of which was kept by the Islamic scholars, capturing the work that was done by the Africans in Islam, and captured a lot of that. And the Arab world was able to maintain a lot of the knowledge that was gleaned from these great cosmotic thinkers that we had there. Now, not only in Africa were there great civilizations. If we look at the Americas, the Aztec culture, again, 1200 years AD. The Mayan culture, 250 years BC to AD. These were ancient cultures. The Inca culture. These are all these in the same period of time. Why is that important? Because this is what was going on globally at the time. At the same time, the Ming Dynasty in China in the 14th century, this is when they built the Great Wall of China and started the Forbidden City and all these things. These were all of the cultures that were taking place around the world. Europe was not involved in that. When you look at Europe at the same time, 1300 AD, Europe was going through the bubonic plague. Massive death spread throughout the entirety of Europe from 1347 all the way to 1353, upwards to maybe 200 million people died in Europe at that time because of the bubonic plague, the disease that was sweeping through Europe, and famine. So while the rest of the world was building great society, Europe was in trauma, in crisis. And this is the part of the history that they don't want us to see. They want us to believe that Europe just kind of showed up and took over, and the rest of the world was just kind of like sitting there watching. But no, this was antithetic to what actually took place in history. And what we found is that at that time, Europe was under massive famine. While we were having Timbuktu and the Chinese of the Ming Dynasty and the Aztec and the Incas and all these other great societies, Europe was struggling for survival. And this is a very critical moment. So what happened? How did they go from being in this particular almost lost existence to where we have today. And we as Africans must understand the passage of history so that we can understand how we got to be where we are today. Why are we talking about the diaspora today? All of this are the seeds that gave us the diaspora. In 1260 AD, Marco Polo, who was assigned to the emperors, the house of the great Kublai Khan, which was the greatest dynasty in the last 3,000 years, was the dynasty of Kublai Khan, who owned everything from China all the way up to Austria. This was the Mongol dynasty under Kublai Khan, incredible. And Marco Polo was a European in his entourage. He was kept as one of the powers of the Kublai Khan dynasty. They allowed everything to come into their dynasty, whether it was Europeans or Arabs or Chinese, whatever. He said, I don't care what you believe in, as long as you pay me. Man, you can give my money, you can believe whatever those people believe in. And so Marco Polo traveled with Kublai Khan and recognized at that point that the greatest societies in the world in terms of medicine and art were in China and in India. And he was aware of that. So he takes that knowledge back to Europe, which was in the process of dying off from disease with no medicine, because at that time, the European system of medicine was basically, cutting you open and putting leeches on you, and basically most of the people who were victims of the bubonic plague died because of disease and because they were dirty. And the people who survived were the people like the Jews and Muslims who had a high sense of hygiene. And the Europeans were dying because they didn't clean themselves, and the Jews had the kosher foods. And so these people, instead of being looked to for solutions, they were being called devils and demons and witches because we're dying and you're not, so you must be doing that to us. This is where Europe was at that time frame. So Marco Polo comes back to Europe saying, look, there is medicine in the East. We should send envoys there. But unbeknownst to them, the Ottoman Empire at the same time frame had gone on and controlled everything, Islamic from Austria all the way down to Saudi Arabia and northern Africa and everything. And these were Islamic warriors, and they had won the Crusades, and if you were not part of the Islam, you were not going to go through this area to get to the East. So what was Europe left to do? You have to understand, Europe was without resources, where the rest of the world, Africa, Asia, we have vast amounts of resources, elephants, buffaloes, and crocodiles, and all of the food that you could possibly want. Vast. Europe was stingy. God was stingy with Europe. They had ice on the ground 6 months out of the year, very, very little food supplies, and competition, where we had elephants, they had wolves and bears to compete with. And then so they had to fight amongst themselves to survive. So when it became an issue of finding a way to the east, they took to the sea. So as a result, this is when you find the so-called age of exploration, when the Europeans left and they started. We all know about this. They tell us about this in history. Cabot, Vasco da Gama, Columbus, but they didn't tell us why Columbus was fighting so hard to get to India. Why did they want to get to India? Because they were searching for the medicines that they had been informed of Marco Polo that existed. So while they were in their desperation state, traveling all over the world, they developed advanced knowledge that the rest of the world didn't have. And that is to say, they knew that the earth was round because they went there. It was Magellan who actually left here and went all the way around and came back and went back to Spain and proved that the earth was round. The rest of the world may have understood the earth was round, but didn't need to do anything with it because they had the rest of the benefits they had. When Cabral came to South America, he found the natives in Brazil completely without any sense of development. They needed no development. They didn't need clothes. They didn't need food. They didn't need housing because they were living in paradise. They could just pluck food off a tree and the weather was always warm. There was no need to have clothes. So this is how the rest of the world was living when Europe was fighting to survival. And so when you look at Europe by contrast, they were fighting. They had developed very advanced weaponry. They had swords and shields and crossbows and horses and armor. Why? Because they had to fight to survive. If they did not fight and kill one another, they would not exist. So during this same time frame, they developed an extremely high level of sophistication in the technology of death. The most advanced technology that existed was in Europe because they had to. Nature was stingy with them and they had to fight. If you were on one side of a river and someone was on the other side of the river, another village, you had to kill them because if they stayed alive, they would eat the food and you would starve. Africa, it was just the opposite. If you were on one side of the river and there was a village on the other side of the river, you went to the other side of the river to get them to help you to kill the elephants because your village couldn't do it alone. And so this was a whole other mindset that came out of Europe that led them to, in position, because they had this advanced technology of warfare and transportation, because they were the ones who had to travel, no one else had to travel, that put them at an extreme advantage over the rest of the world. So when they descended upon Africa, it was easy for them to defeat Africa. And that's what we have to recognize. Africa suffered a military defeat at the hands of Europe, a coordinated attack of all the Europeans who recognized once they traveled that Africa was the land of goods. This is where everything was, the food, the animals, everything was there and the people, and we can go and take that. And the Africans could not defend themselves because, one, we had not spent the last 1,000 years fighting and killing. Okay, and so then they sat down upon Africa. All of this leads us to why are we where we are today? Because we have to understand the sequence of events with all of the murdering and kidnapping attacks. Here's a language thing that I want to bring out. One of the things that we like to talk about is slavery. And we talk about the slave trade and all of that. We need to develop a different type of language because there are two different crimes involved here. One, slavery, but the other is human trafficking and kidnapping. You do not become a slave until you become stationary on someone's plantation and they force you to work. That only occurs after you have been kidnapped and human trafficked to that point. So we need to be able to make the distinction between those two, because this is what's actually going to come out when we start doing the real issue, the work that's going to have to be done about reparations. We're going to have the legal framework of saying, there are two things. One, human trafficking, which is a crime, and slavery, which is actually an economic system of operation. Slavery existed in Africa, but it did not rise to the level of the industrial human trafficking of hundreds of millions of people that we found came out of Europe. So, and this is the one thing we have to look at. What is the true damage to Africa of the so-called slave trade? Not only we have to start with the number of people who were killed just in their villages because of that. Then the captives were forced to march for hundreds of kilometers to the coast, half of whom died on the way because many of them were injured and weak, so they died on the way. So then after they would arrive at the coast, and not like the ships were like taxis, they had to sit in these castles and dungeons for months in these disease situations, even more people died. And so as you can see, there's a death train all along the way. And then once you got on the ships, we were packed in inhumane conditions for a trip that took 3 months, shackled like this and packed like this. 50% of the people died along the way. So when you look at the chain of death from the time that the enemy showed up in our village to if you started with 100 people in the village, maybe 10 of them would arrive on the other shore. So this is the true magnitude of the destruction of Africa, and we have to look at that. And this is where we went. This is the process. Look at all of the people that came to vote, and these lines are representing actual volumes of people over time. So as you can see, the bulk of people came out of here in Central Africa, Congo, and in Angola, in those areas, and most of them were taken to Brazil and South America. Many went to the Caribbean, and then even fewer, interestingly enough, went to the United States. If you see the direct lines of people, the very, very few of the people who actually left Africa went to the United States. And so what they found was that this was where they brought people in the Caribbean, where people were actually, that was the workshop, if you will. People would be brought in, divided up, and then shipped out. So you have a ship that came in from Nigeria, say, and it would land in Barbados, and then they would take half the people, 1/3 of the people and leave them in Barbados, another 20% would go to Cuba, another 15% would go to Louisiana. All of these were the same village of people. So this is why we have to reject this concept of us not being Africans. And when you trace the history back, most of us were in the same ship. People who call themselves Jamaicans and Barbadians and Brazilians were all part of the same Yoruba village. And so once we recognize that, we start to understand our true identity a little bit clearer. But this is the origin of the transatlantic slave trade and the resulting African diaspora that we come to find. Not only were the British and the French doing it, the Spanish, who we don't hear a lot about, they also were engaged in the serious trafficking of our people, bringing them here. So you speak in Cuba, and then in Mexico, all the way down the coast of Colombia, and all Peru, and Santiago, Chile, all of these places. There are African people all along the coast here. These were our people who were trafficked to all of these areas by, and at that time we have to recognize the slave trade of that day was like the oil trade of today. Can you imagine a country that would say, okay, we're not going to do oil, we're not going to have any petroleum, just forget it? You would not be a player in the game today. If you didn't have oil, petroleum, you don't exist. That's the way slavery was back then. If you were not engaged in slave trade, if you were the Spanish, the French, the British, the Belgians, everybody, if you weren't doing human trafficking, you were not a power. And so that's a very important thing we have to understand. This would set up the entire world. Once you got to that side, the life expectancy of an African surviving is, remember, we had out of 100 people, we only get 20 who arrive here, and out of that 20, the life expectancy was 5 years. You were worked to death within 5 years. Why? Because there were so many people coming across. This was a major industry. And so when you look at the scope of how many people, we're talking about, they say 12 million people actually arrived from the African continent to the New World. But if you look at that chain of death, we're talking about probably 100 million people died in order for that 12 million to survive. And this is all part of our understanding of what actually took place. This is where the African diaspora comes from. And if you look at what they did, they were able to use this entire trading system, manufactured goods, sugar, molasses, rice, whale oil, people. All of this was a major financial industry, just like the oil industry is today. This was the major industry of the day, and that is what gave us the capitalist system. It went from a handful of people sitting around dividing up the money to pay for the slave ships, and that gave us the stock market that we have today. And it went from the basic industry of making the chains and the oars and the guns and all of that, and this gives us modern society today with all of the steel mills and foundries, and everything that we have today can be traced directly to the slave trade. Not indirectly, but directly. So this is where the system that we see today has come from. And we went from an Africa with our traditional societies to an Africa divided up in 1914 by the hands of the colonial people after the Berlin Conference in 1889, all the way down to the Africa that we have today, which is this hodgepodge of salad. And we all know that this has nothing to do with the Africa that we are. But this is what we see today when we look at the map and we see Africa. This is what we think of, not this. And these were our ancient societies in Kush, in Kemet, and Himba, and Punt, and all of these societies that we developed over time. This is where we are today. Now, that is Africa. Now, what about diaspora? Now that's the groundwork of how the diaspora came into being. So now that we have to see that, where is this diaspora that we know? Let's look at this. Just look at basically where they brought us was the United States, the Caribbean, and South America. We're going to focus on that, and we're not going to talk about the Arab diaspora, which is a whole other discussion, the European diaspora, even the Asian diaspora. There's no knowledge now that there are so many African people who are original people from Japan and China and all those things. That research is coming out by one of our great Dr. Renoko Rashidi did a lot of research on that. So this information is coming out now because we have people formally studying it. You got to remember, up until the last 20 and 30, 40 years, no one was actually doing the academic work to make this happen because we did not have the critical mass of scholars. And so now, let's look at the African diaspora in the country. Let's start with the Caribbean. The Caribbean, 46 million people live in the Caribbean today. All of these islands we know about, and the major ones are Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. But all of these islands are all populated by African people. Every island in the Caribbean is 90% black. We have people from the Caribbean. If you go to anywhere, you show up in Grenada, you might as well have been in Mombasa somewhere. It is black. If you go to Haiti, if you didn't know you were in Haiti, you would swear you were in some part of West Africa. These are African societies. And this is the important part. Haiti is one of the most important places on planet Earth. We could do an entire seminar, but the Haitian Revolution, those African people who rose up in Haiti under Toussaint Louverture, broke the back of the entire slave industry by defeating Napoleon and forcing Napoleon out of the slave industry. And from there, the rest of the islands started sweeping, and from Haiti's freedom, the entire collapse of the trade, the slave system fell in 30 years. They've been going on for 200-300 years. With the Haitian Revolution, 1803, within 30 years, the entire slave system had broken down. So this is the Caribbean again. You know about Jamaica and Bob Marley, and these are global figures that come out of this area, which again is an African population. All of these islands, Guadeloupe, St. Vincent, Grenadine, Grenada, Trinidad, Tobago, Barbados, all of these are black countries. Now let's talk about South America. This is Colombia. I was surprised when I went to Colombia to find that this entire coastline is African. And I don't mean just black, I mean African, militant African. These are African Colombians having an anti-racist demonstration in Colombia. One of the most anti-racist, hard-fighting people on the planet today are the Africans in Colombia. And also Colombia has a relationship with Kenya, as a matter of fact. The vice president of Colombia is this Afro-Colombian woman who came to Kenya and is working to get Swahili taught in Colombia. This is where they're coming from. These are Colombians are just like bad. Okay? And so we don't know about them. We don't know about these people. We're talking about Brazil. Nearly 50% of Brazil's population, that's nearly 100 million people, are Afro-Brazilians. Brazil, I met the Brazilian who said Brazil is a South African apartheid. They make sure that the world does not know that half of Brazil is a black country. And when you go there, you see people who look like this who are embracing clearly their African culture. Again, Brazil is one of the most populous black countries in the world. I think the most populous is Nigeria. Second is Ethiopia. Third, I think, is Congo. Fourth is Brazil. More than any other country, more black people in Brazil than any other country in Africa. More than in Kenya, more than in Tanzania, more than in Somalia. And that's a statement. How many, as you saw from the map, this is where they stole our people, and this is where they put them. Now let's talk about the subject matter that we are going to focus on, the deep dive into the United States. This is the issue of the African diaspora in the Western Hemisphere. And not focusing on the United States because they're any more important.